You may go.
You make it running.
Tom will make it up in a moment here and get us formally started. I just wanted to get us all quiet and down and ready to go. We're late starting. Tom and I were late. We had to go rescue the sound and camera equipment from out in Mesquite, and so that made us tardy, so we apologize for that. But while we're waiting to get everything started for sure, does anybody have anything they need to get up and announce? Well, that sounds smooth, so Tom, why don't you take it and introduce the speaker and we'll head off to the races.
All right.
Glad you can make it in tonight. We have a good crowd. Please understand we don't have 6 servers serving us back here. They do take good care of us, so be very kind and generous with them. They do give it, for those of you who don't come all the time, I'm going to tell you this, they do not charge us for coming and using this room like many and most really restaurants do. So we promise them that we will order food and we'll be generous with our servers. So please observe that and keep our good faith with the restaurant. Thank you.
Okay, welcome to the College of Complexes. This is our 416th meeting since we started in 2009. We put a speaker on every week, a different subject. We require a speaker to take a position on an issue or express a point of view. They had to be for or against something. We don't care what it is. We give an hour to make a presentation. If anybody interrupts the speaker, we mind the interrupter. We'll listen to one fool at a time. That's one of our rules. Then we have questions and answers from the audience of the speaker, not speeches. Then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everybody in this audience that wants to gets 5 minutes at the podium here to respond to the speaker said for or against. The speaker gets the last word, gets a comment, and a comment to close the meeting. That's how it works. But before we introduce our speaker, as he mentioned, it's time for announcements. Anybody have any announcements they want to make? Now's the time. Did you want to make any? No?
Right now.
All right. No announcements. All right. Next week is Gene Lance is going to talk about why economics is doomed to failure. It's in the itinerary there. Everybody can shoot. June 23rd, how bad is it? A perspective on gun violence. It's Max Smith. He's going to be talking about that. And on June 30th, what the left really wants, Ken Sauter, he's sitting right there, he'll be our speaker. There's no meetings July 7th and 14th. This restaurant will be closed from, I think, July 2nd to July 10th. They're going on vacation in Europe. So we'll take a vacation too, 2 weeks. No sense trying to go someplace else and get everybody confused.
What are the dates? You're not going to have it?
Yeah, I gave you the sheet, didn't I? It's on there. July 7th and 14th, there'll be no meetings. And July 21st, Dr. Chris Bolt's going to talk about obtaining self-improvement through individual personality inventory. That'll be interesting. Anyway, it's all on your itinerary. I'm not going to read all this. Our speaker tonight is Hadi Jawad. He's going to talk about Muslims have a rightful place and a valuable role to play in America. He's with the Dallas Peace and Justice Center. He will discuss how, as one of mankind's great religions, Islam has provided spiritual guidance and nourishment to hundreds of millions of adherents for 2 millennia. Over the centuries, Muslim societies have made indispensable contribution to the arts and literature, physical, natural, and theoretical sciences, and medicine. He will argue that Western societies have been apprehensive and even openly hostile towards Islam and Muslims in the Trump era. Hadi points out that fear of Islam and hatred of Muslims has reached new lows. He raises the question, is a clash of civilization inevitable, or can honest discussion of shared values, hopes, and aspirations lead to respect and understanding? Hadi is confident we'll demonstrate that not only is it possible, but urgently needed in our turbulent and challenging time. So without further ado, please give a very, very warm welcome to Hadi Jawad.
All right. Yeah, we're going to talk about this stuff. The correct pronunciation of my name is what? Hadi. 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 Hadi in the Arabic means, it's one of the names of the Divine Beloved. God has 99 attributes in Islam. And, the first one is the most merciful. The second one is the most compassionate. Third one is the most subtle. Fourth is the most peaceful. And somewhere down the line, God is Hadi. That means God is the guide. He's the best guide there is. That was sort of a unprepared beginning. Can I move around? Is it okay? Because I don't like to. Yeah. So
We're gonna be on YouTube.
who gave me permission? Raise your hand to move around.
Carry the microphone.
Oh my goodness.
It's gonna be on YouTube.
Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. So stay on YouTube, right?
Yeah, don't go too far to the side.
Stay on the
Like that.
camera and mic.
Marco Rubio drinking the water thing. All right. Well, I'll try to stay in one place. Okay. Promise you. So I really appreciate you all having me here. I was here about a month ago or so, and Dr. Rick Halpern, a dear beloved friend, spoke from this podium about human rights. And during the Q&A, and he gave a brilliant, I thought, presentation about the global human rights situation. We went from country to country to country to country. Places we thought that obviously should not have human rights issues, but they do. Even in the Scandinavian countries, right? Norway and Denmark, the most evolved of all the societies here on earth right now, according to in my opinion, and opinions of many others, the progress they have made. But they also have human rights issues. And he traveled to Israel, and within Israel he saw a lot of human rights issue within the country of Israel, which we are told is a paragon of human rights and blah, blah, blah. We hear so much about Israel, but then he also went to Brazil and Pakistan and Egypt. And I thought he presented a very cogent, very intelligent analysis of human rights situation in the world as it is currently. But the question and answer session that he was subjected to, in my opinion, was a little bit harsh, I thought. The questions that were raised had to do with Islam and Muslims, and seeing what I heard, and I could be totally wrong because I'm a human being and I make a lot of mistakes, and beyond mistakes, I hear things that I think I heard, but I didn't really because of my own prejudices and biases, right? I'm intensely, just like any other human being, I have intense filters and biases, and I listen to things. But anyway, during the Q&A, I thought, and his wife Laura also thought that y'all were a rough crowd, that y'all handled him really, really rough.
Rough.
Yeah, y'all were rough on him. So we were outside, and he was kind of dazed with the whole experience, and Laura, of course, was still very upset because she thought y'all were indulging in speech that was not acceptable in her mind. And anyway, so the topic was Islam and the questions I heard. I thought maybe I should come back and at least try in my mind to maybe allay some of the concerns or fears. I'll try. I mean, it's an immensely difficult thing to talk about Islam and Islamophobia here in the United States today, especially here in Texas. I mean, this is a tough sell for a Muslim to come in front of me and say, I'm going to try to humanize Muslims in Islam for you tonight. I'm going to try my best, and with some caveats that I'm not a scholar. Good luck with that, somebody said, right? I'm not a scholar, I am not a imam, I'm not a faith leader, I'm just an average Muhammad, even though my name is not Muhammad. Y'all get it, like average Joe. That funny? No? It is funny. Who said funny? Okay, so with that caveat, I'll try to get through, I try to focus my thoughts around this for the past couple of months. I've ended up with 8 pages of written material. It sounds to me like, my partner says, sounds like a beginning of something. So we'll see. We'll see, inshallah, we say in Islamic faith. We'll see what God has in store. So I'm going to talk about Islam, Islamophobia, my own experience of it. I think number one goal I've already articulated to you. I would like to bring down your fears or apprehensions about Islam and Muslims a couple of notches. Okay, 1. Whatever I can get. Half a notch. Whatever I can get. Yeah? Just bring it down a little bit.
Out of 100.
Whatever your context is for that. Yeah. I'll leave it up to you. It's your context. You define your own level of apprehension, your own level of anxiety. You know, this is like a self-diagnosis you do for yourself. And if I have something of value to tell you, my hope is that I leave here with some of you experiencing a little less anxiety. So let's see if we can, how much we can get through this, okay? I'll try to keep it slow so we are all together. At the beginning of the 20th century, 1910s and 20s, almost every single Muslim intellectual was in love with the West. They wanted their countries to look like Britain and France. At that time, the leader of secular democratic modernity. Some went even so far as to say that the Europeans were better Muslims than the Muslims themselves because their modernized societies were closer to the egalitarian ideals of the Quran more closely than anything that prevailed in traditionally Muslim countries. They were enamored with the West in the early 1900s. Muslim intellectuals and scholars and leaders throughout the Muslim world. It is important to remember this early enthusiasm. When Muslims first encountered the modern democratic West, they did not recoil in visceral disgust, but recognized that it resonated with their own religious traditions. Muslims saw something in the West in the early 1900s that meant to them that, hey, this is something that we aspire to also, and these people have achieved it. You're all with me, right? Oh, speaking, I'm not loud enough already?
No, you're not loud enough.
I'm not, okay. All right, cool. All right, thank you for that. All right. So today, So today,
Left mic.
thank you, Ginger. The left mic. This is the better one. Okay, all right,
Works better.
all right. I can pose with this guy.
Yeah, yeah.
So today, many Muslims and Westerners regard one another with deep distrust and great suspicion. After the 9/11 atrocities, many in the West have come to believe that, as Samuel P. Huntington had predicted, there is indeed a clash of civilizations because Islam makes Muslims unfit for modern society. Many are convinced that Islam somehow compels Muslims to commit acts of terror and violence, that it applauds suicide bombers, that it is inherently incompatible with liberal Western democracy. This is understandable since most Americans and Europeans have very little understanding of either Islam or the political conditions that have contributed to our present predicament. So the polling, I don't have the number exactly, but forgive me. The polling says, what is your general view of Muslims? Like, dislike, dislike, overwhelming, dislike. Next question, or third or fourth question. How much do you know about Muslims and Islam? Way down there. Not much. That's funny. Polls confirm, however, much apprehension that is concerning Muslims and Islam in the West. In the US, 53% poll views of Islam described as not favorable or not too favorable, 53%. In the Netherlands, 63% claim Islam is incompatible with modern European life. In France, 73% believe similarly. Such perceptions were captured in a groundbreaking report issued in 1996 in the UK by the Commission on British Muslims in Islamophobia. This is a really important report. It comes out about 22 years ago. It's known as the Runnymede Report. It analyzed discrimination experienced by many Muslims in Britain and made policy recommendations to the government to protect their basic rights, right? So this is the UK government said, okay, we're going to study this phenomenon of Islamophobia, see what it looks like, and then we can make policy recommendations to the British government how to protect the rights of Muslims, a minority community that's living in the United States. So this was a government agency producing a report. And this is what they found. They found 8 things that we don't have time. I'm going to go through maybe 4 of them real quick. The first one they found was that the prevailing discussion about Islam is that Islam is monolithic and static. This is the notion that Islam lacks both diversity, internal differences, and disagreements. All Muslims are in lockstep because they're all basically the same and believe in the same way. This view gets compounded and solidified because media reports focus on violence and acts of terrorism by a tiny Muslim minority day in, day out, 24/7, and therefore it must follow that violence and terrorism are endemic to Islam. If a woman in a Muslim majority country like Saudi Arabia faces restrictions such as the prohibition to drive, which is changing right now, we conclude that all Muslim women across all Muslim majority countries must face similar restrictions, when in actuality Saudi Arabia is the exception, not the rule. By the same illogic, if ISIS commits violence against Western targets, it is concluded that all Muslims are prone to violence because all Muslims are fundamentally the same. Ironically, when Anders Breivik, a self-identified Norwegian Christian, kills dozens of kids and adults in a killing spree outside Oslo in 2011, Christianity or Christians are not implicated. Y'all remember that Breivik's guy? Yeah. 64. No discussion. Number 2, Islam as separate and other. Another characteristic of Islamophobia is the notion that Islam does not share any of the core values of any other religion, not any other religion, including especially Judaism or Christianity, or Western culture, for that matter. Hence, the opposition to building mosques is justified because Islamic symbols run counter to Western secular values, which Christianity embraces and epitomizes. No minarets in Switzerland, but steeples are okay. Y'all know minarets, the part of the mosque that comes up straight. Steeples are okay, but minarets, we can't handle those. Islam is inferior. Another closed view about Islam is that not only is it different, but also inferior to the West. Islam is barbaric, irrational, and sexist, in contrast to the civilized, enlightened, and gender-equal West. Women are, this is a question women should answer, right? Number 4, Islam is the enemy. Islam, according to the fourth closed view, is identified as hostile, violent, and aggressive. Islam is a religion bent on conquest, and for this reason, there is an inevitable clash of civilizations between Islam and the West. There's a lot of talk about the Islamization of the United States, that we're going to take over 1% of the population. Somebody tell me how you do that. I'd like to know. I need some information, some technology. It is important to note how Islam is linked to violence and terrorism in a manner that feeds not only Western foreign policies and wars against Muslim nations, but also domestic policies that place restrictions on Muslims living in the West, or that single out Muslims as people who are particularly susceptible to terrorist activities. For example, the profiling of Muslim passengers in U.S. airport security lines can certainly be interpreted as based in the assumption that all Muslims are prone to violence and must be targeted for additional security measures in order to protect non-Muslim Americans. And the last one, anti-Muslim discourse as natural. Now, this is the one that bugs me the most because I live here and I hear this stuff all the time. So I'm going to do a deep dive here for you. Anti-Muslim discourse as natural. The report finally notes that anti-Muslim discourse is so pervasive that even some public figures who ardently fight for tolerance, equal rights for all citizens may express little or no concern for the discrimination faced by Muslims. Yeah? They're good on this subject, but when it comes to Muslim law, we got to have a separate understanding here, because these guys are different. Prejudiced statements or views about Muslims are not called out as bigoted. Instead, they are considered normal. So here's the really good example of that. In October 2010, right. Everybody with me so far? Everybody doing good? We're not going to have a food fight tonight, right?
Well, you're going to have one. Prep for it.
In October 2010, a well-respected journalist with National Public Radio, NPR, his name was Juan Williams. Y'all remember him? Juan Williams is still around, right? He openly proclaimed that the sight of Muslims on an airplane made him nervous. Remember that? Juan Williams, he was with NPR, supposed to be a bastion of progressivism, whatever. Juan Williams said, man, I see Muslims, I get nervous. NPR took immediate action and fired him. And guess what? Fox News immediately picked him up. A major debate ensued over whether NPR overreached in its decision to dismiss Williams. Now, had Williams articulated that the sight of Jews or African Americans on an airplane caused him anxiety, NPR's decision to fire him would have attracted wide support, right? If he had said African Americans or Jews make me nervous, then, Anyway, NPR's decision to fire him would have attracted wide support if he had said Jews or blacks make him nervous. Williams articulated a sentiment deemed acceptable enough by a wide spectrum of the public that NPR's decision to fire him, more than his original statement, became the focal point of the controversy. Forgot the point, what he had said, but did NPR overreact in firing him that quickly? That became the topic of discussion. This is normalizing inappropriate behavior towards the minority population in the United States. Because Islamophobia is linked with issues of terrorism so much, let me delve into that just a little bit. How are we doing on time, Tom?
Oh, you got plenty of time.
Oh, good time. Okay.
You got 30 minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay, we can
If you need it.
time is on our side, huh? That's good. All right. If we are indeed going to be fighting a war against terror or terrorism, we need accurate information. We need to get a little better informed. We cannot afford to remain in ignorance because the stakes are not only too high, it is vital to know who our enemies are, but it is equally important to know who they are not. We should know who our enemies are, and we should know who they are not, who's not our enemy. Only a tiny portion of Muslims take part in acts of terror and violence, but when media and politicians continue to denigrate Islam, accepting without question a stereotypical view that has prevailed in the West since the time of the Crusades. So y'all are coming to it pretty naturally. This is not anything new. This has been around for a long, long time. And today, my hope and prayer is that we can maybe take a sort of a different view of what we've been handed down, and maybe question it, right? That is the hallmark of civilization, of education, of enlightenment, is that we question things. right? We have, as sentient human beings, God has given us a brain and expects us to use it, particularly to question. That's one of the things that I really love about being in America. I'm going to tell you all that. I came here living under military dictatorship until I was 20 years old and came to the U.S. and it's absolutely uncommunicable. I cannot communicate to you the freedom I feel that I can say whatever I wanted to say to my government or in a public place like this and not be afraid.
Where did you come from?
Pakistan. Grew up in Pakistan. So it's absolutely, I mean, I am proud to tell you that Muslims are in the trenches today fighting for civil rights. Not just for Muslims, but for all of us. We have Muslim organizations headed by Muslims that were not born here and now more and more kids that grew up here who are Americans just like most of you who were born here. I was not. Were born here that get this American project, that they get this American experiment, that are in totally love with their country. Young Muslim lawyers who are in the trenches making sure that our civil rights are protected and the Constitution prevails in this country, which, as some of you might agree, it looks a little bit shaky right now. It's a little shaky. So this has been going on since the Crusade. This whole notion of Muslim Islam. I'll try to get into it just a little bit. But if we continue on this path, we will eventually alienate Muslims who have no quarrel with the West. Millions and hundreds of millions of Muslims around the world have no quarrel with the West, none whatsoever. Who are either enjoying or longing for greater democracy and who are horrified by the atrocities committed in the name of their faith. We urgently need to build bridges with the Islamic world, especially with Muslim Americans. I cannot think of any project right now more crucial at our current time. It is correct to say, however, we have been traumatized as Americans. We've been traumatized since the attacks of 9/11, as radicalized Muslims carried out series of dastardly attacks against us on 9/11, then attacks in Europe, here in Tampa Bay, San Bernardino. These are traumatic experiences for all of us. I lived through 9/11. I was already here 30 years. I had assimilated into American society. Some of you might not. I was just part of American society as far as I could tell, right? Regular job, friends, neighbors. I attend church with some friends. I'm part of the community. I've totally assimilated. So I was horrified, just as you were horrified when we saw planes flying into the Twin Towers. My horror didn't stop there, though. The other nightmare that we were encountering, some of us, as Muslims, minority Muslims, was how will my neighbors react to me? How will I be treated by people I have known for 10, 15, 20, 30 years? We were scared. We were scared on two levels. We were scared of these terrorists like you were, and we were scared of you. If somebody like you might do something. And I think this is a good segue over here. I'm going to introduce to you a very dear friend. He's here and he honored me with his presence. He calls me his mentor, but he's become my teacher, what he's done. This is unplanned, but I feel like this is something I have to do. Just in the aftermath of 9/11, a man named Mark Stroman, S-T-R-O-M-A-N, heavily tattooed, white supremacist, went on a killing spree. He's going to avenge the attacks of 9/11. He went to a gas station or grocery store and shot Indian American who was a Hindu, not a Muslim. Vasudev Patel killed him. He's got a wife, Mrs. Patel. She raised 6 kids, 4 or 5 kids after her husband died with great difficulty. Still keeping love in our heart. He also killed a Pakistani storekeeper, Viqar Hassan, and his third victim was going to be a guy I'm going to bring out here. His name is Rais Bhuyan. He's a Bangladeshi American, and he came to this country. He used to serve in the Bangladeshi Air Force. And to get his feet on the ground here, he was working at a gas station here in South Dallas. And Mark Stroman came into his store, asked him where he was from, and then fired a shotgun in his face. Rais mercifully survived. This is 2001. He survived, and in the years in his recovery, and he was penniless before. All the hospital bills made him more poor. He had no idea what to do with his life. He had come here with an American dream, which had turned into an American nightmare. There was a book written about this experience that parallels the life of Mark Stroman and Rais Bhuyan. It's called Patriotic Americans, or the Two Patriots. The Patriots. He'll talk about that. So a few years later, Mark is captured by the police and sentenced to death. And Rais Bhuyan comes back from pilgrimage in the holy city of Mecca, and comes back here with this notion that maybe the best thing that can happen in his life situation was that he launched a campaign to save Mark Stroman's life. And he did. He started a campaign to save Mark Stroman's life, along with the widows who gave their support. And for that, I remember the whole episode, the whole drama. But anyway, in 2011, I'm just going to cut forward. In 2011, Esquire magazine announced its American of the Year. Steve Jobs and Rais Bhuyan were the Americans of the Year. Come up for a second. So, you guys getting to see 2 American Muslims today. Say a few words. He's long-winded, so I'm going to cut him off.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you, Brother Hadi, for that kind introduction. And even though I was not prepared to come here to give a talk, but he's my mentor. When my mentor is somewhere, how can I not go there and show my support for my mentor? Because I'm here today because of him. After being just give you a quick summary of my story in like 3 minutes speech. As Brother Hadi mentioned that I was born in Bangladesh and I was in the Air Force. But I did not feel my destiny was in the military. But I wanted to come to USA for additional higher education. So when I got a chance to come to USA, I quit my job, came to the US, and I started working at a gas station in Dallas, right before 9/11. I moved from New York City, and then 9/11 happened, and these white supremacists killed 2 South Asian men and shot me in the face from point blank range. And I'm still carrying more than 35 feathers on my face. When I touch my face, I can feel it's all there. As a result of this shooting, I lost vision in one eye. I lost my home, my sense of security, my job, and my fiancé. But gained more than $60,000 in medical bill. And when my father heard what happened to me, he suffered a stroke. But thankfully, he survived. Long story short, I was taken to a hospital which is private and expensive, and I did not have any health insurance at that time. So the hospital discharged me next day and asked me to arrange follow-up medical treatment. So I call it as a second part of my American nightmare. fast forward 9 years, I went to a Hajj in Mecca with my mother, and I came back as a changed person. My heart was completely changed, and I felt so much love for everyone, not just for my attacker, but for entire humanity. And I thought about my shooter sitting in a death row waiting to be executed, and I realized that his execution is not the solution. I suffered terribly, but I did not see any value in him suffering as well, and I thought, if he got a chance to live even behind bars, he might be able to become a better human being. He might be able to contribute to society in a positive way. I saw him as a victim too. And I came back and I reached out to his brother and also Dr. Halperin because I didn't know where to start. I had the passion to save this person's life, but didn't know where to start. So I reached out to him. We built a coalition, and with the support of Amnesty International, Muslim Legal Fund of America, a non-profit based in London called Reprieve, we launched an international campaign. We went to the European Union Parliament, German Parliament, we went to the headquarters of Lundbeck, the lethal injection manufacturer in Denmark, and we were able to convince them to urge the governor of Texas not to use their product to kill human beings. Not only that, at the end of 2011, Lundbeck announced they would stop supplying this drug to the US prisons that carry out execution. So as a result of this trip, now there is a huge crisis of this drug in the US prisons, the pentobarbital, we used to import from this drug company. I also went to the US Supreme Court asking for clemency. And I did all these things because of my upbringing and my faith taught me to do the right thing. There's a verse in the Quran, chapter 5, verse 32, it says that saving a human life is like saving the entire mankind. And taking a human life is like taking the entire mankind. So during the pilgrimage, I came across all these verses and I was extremely inspired that that is the right thing to do, save this man's life and make a positive change in our society. So after that, I built a non-profit called World.Hate. You can look it online, it's called world.hate.org. I work in the IT as a systems manager full-time, and I travel the world and give public speaking to make this world a better place for us and for our next generations.
All right, great. I just wanted to produce some human faces, some Muslim faces to you all. Hear some of these stories. You just got the most compelling of them all. And there are hundreds of thousands of millions of Muslims that are living in this country that are part of the fabric of American society. Some of them might have Muslim doctors. They're nurses. They're teaching in colleges. They're students. They're part. And there has been no time in this country when Muslims have not been here. There were Muslims on the ships with Columbus, and there were Muslims that crossed in the western part of the United States with the conquistadores, with the Spaniards that came. There are mosques all along the western coast that go back 300, 400 years. There was never any time that Muslims were not a part of American society. This is our home just as it is here. I was not born here, but I got here as fast as I could. Now, let's get back on our topic. I just begin to talk to you a little about the issues or the misinformation or the disinformation surrounding the word terrorism. To me, it's becoming more of a throwaway word. It's beginning to lose meanings because of what I'm going to share with you. Polling indicates 40% of Americans live in fear of a terrorist attack. 48% of this group here, including me, they're like, that's a high number. We're scared of a terrorist attack. But let's put that into some context. This is data, and data doesn't really work in the face of fear. If you really feel anxious, I can give you all kinds of data. Like the kid who thinks there's a monster underneath the bed. You can turn the light on, you can, turn the torch light on, show them, and get them down there and look underneath the bed that there's no monster. It still doesn't do anything, right? The fear is still there. So fear is a powerful, powerful human emotion, which means that it can also be sort of easily manipulated, right? So 40% of Americans live in fear of a terrorist attack. Putting that into context, data shows we are more likely to be shot by a toddler. Just bare bones statistics numbers. You're more likely to be shot by a toddler than a terrorist. Toddler. Excuse me. Toddler. How do you all say it? Toddler. Maybe it's a Texas accent. Toddler.
Alias child.
Hit by terrorists.
Or get struck by lightning twice. Or, this is one I love, be attacked by your own furniture. Faulty furniture. Faulty furniture. Faulty furniture.
Furniture that falls.
It's more likely you're going to get into an encounter with your furniture than get killed by a sure, it's not funny, but here's some information for you. As a South Asian Muslim in the South, as a South Asian American Muslim, I am 3 times more likely to be killed by a white supremacist than any one of you. 3 times as much possibility that I'll get shot by a white supremacist than any one of you or race. You too, you're in my group. Oh my God. So while the threat of terrorism, right, we don't take away anything from that, right? The threat of terrorism is real. It's there. It's happening. It's happening around the world. But it's also a threat that is widely misunderstood. That is the point. It is said, sometimes people ask, if there's no connection between Islam and terrorism, why is every terrorist a Muslim? I hear that a lot. If there's no connection between Islam and terrorism, why is every terrorist a Muslim? Fact is, not all terrorists are Muslims.
That's true.
The second deadliest terrorist attack in U.S. history was carried out in Oklahoma City by Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols. How about Ted Kaczynski? How about Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber who terrorized America for years by sending explosives to the U.S. mail to unsuspecting innocent recipients? There are dozens of other acts of terror that have nothing to do with Islam, but some continue to insist there is something inherent in Islam that allows Muslims to invoke its teachings to justify their murderous and gruesome acts of violence, and which does not exist in the followers of other religions, including Christianity and Judaism. I'm sure you remember this guy, Eric Rudolph. He bombed the Olympic Games in Atlanta in 1996. He also bombed an abortion clinic and a gay bar. A self-proclaimed decent Catholic, he said he was acting on his religious beliefs. Maybe you're thinking, well, that's not an accurate representation of Christianity. And of course you're right. You're absolutely correct. You all remember Joseph Kony in Uganda? The African Joseph Kony. He described himself as a Christian prophet. Kony and his marauding army carried out mass abductions, mass killings, mass rape, terrorized innocent African civilians. As a leader of the Lord's Resistance Army, that's what he called it, the Lord's Resistance Army, Joseph Kony ranks as one of the vilest and most heinous war crimes in history, who claimed to be leading a militia, a Christian militia. He was leading a Christian militia, doing all these things. Called himself a prophet of God. He was a Christian prophet that had come to save his people. You probably would like to say to this that this in no way reflects Christianity. Of course, you will be right again. Now consider the Middle East. Let's talk about ISIS. People who are dying because of ISIS murderous campaign are Muslims. The people who are fighting ISIS are Muslims.
Russians.
The Russians?
And Russians.
Okay, let's talk. Let's keep it real, Hank. Let's keep it real. Those who are supporting ISIS are also Muslims. Muslims are supporting ISIS. ISIS itself calls it Muslim. Muslims are fighting against ISIS. Muslims are writing against ISIS. So what kind of general statement can you make about ISIS? That's a conundrum, right? Unless you want to just take some broad brushes, pick up some broad brushes and start painting stuff. I can do something like that. But what does it really say? Is this the essence of Islam? Does this reflect in any way the teachings of Islam? Or what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught Muslims to do? It doesn't. It doesn't. It's got nothing to do with it. Muslims are paying a very heavy price at the hands of ISIS and Al-Qaeda in the Middle East. Both of these I would like to mention to you as an aside. This is a topic for a different lecture some other time. Both of these organizations were midwifed by Western powers. Western powers.
Our policies.
Midwife.
CIA.
Enough? 5 minutes? Oh my goodness. All right, I'll speed up.
Well,
5 minutes.
Cut some off.
I was going to give you some other examples of, yeah, some other people like Bob Deere. I remember him. He was motivated by a right-wing religious ideology, killed 3 people at the Denver Planned Parenthood. Don't know about this, a long time ago, yeah. It was not described as terrorism. Goes into Planned Parenthood, machine guns. A wild Christian saying that I'm acting on my ideology. This is how I'm informed. My religious background teaches me to do this. We didn't call it terrorism. Dylan Roof, you all remember him? Neo-Nazi, self-proclaimed Christian. He's doing it for the purity of the race. Right? We didn't call that terrorism. Michael Wade Page. Michael Wade Page, you all might remember him. Not remember him, but we do, because he walked into a Sikh temple in Wisconsin. And he was going to kill some Muslims. The only problem was they were Sikhs, they're not Muslims. The only problem was for those poor people, those poor souls that were lost that night, that evening, is they wear turbans and they have beards. They didn't call that terrorism either. No, it's not terrorism. When Joseph Stack, y'all remember this guy, Joseph Stack, who left a 140-page manifesto proclaiming that the only way to fight the tyranny of the US government is through violence, and flew an airplane into the IRS building in Austin. Y'all remember that?
Yeah.
That wasn't terrorism. They didn't call it terrorism. It's funny. That's why I say it's a throwaway word now. It's garbage. What does it, what does it mean? I'm gonna end. Islamophobia is wrong and inaccurate and counterproductive. It's wrong, it's inaccurate, it's counterproductive. There is a debate going on within the Islamic world for centuries, for millennia, about liberal Islam and conservative Islam. There are many voices in the 1.6 billion Muslims, intellectuals, scholars, average people like you and me, who read the Quran in a totally different way than these than these people do, these jihadis do. Totally different way. We need to find a way to empower these voices. When we engage in Islamophobia in this country, we feed the narrative that these jihadis are telling people in the Middle East and South Asia. The narrative that they have back over there on the other side is that Muslims are being tortured, persecuted, intimidated, harassed, treated like subhumans by the West. That's the narrative they give to get recruits, because they need recruits all the time. So whenever we engage in Islamophobia, take away the rights of American Muslims, Muslims that are our neighbors here, we are feeding that narrative. When the pastor in Florida was going to do that Quran burning, y'all remember that? David Petraeus called in. General David Petraeus, the authority on counterinsurgency. One of the pillars of the American military establishment in our history, called this pastor up and says, what you are doing is not only wrong, it's inaccurate and it's dangerous, because it puts American lives at risk overseas and also feeds the narrative that our enemies. So there is a common ground between Muslims who live in America, who call themselves Americans, and the rest of us. When criminals, jihadis, or terrorists, whatever, when they hide themselves in a population, we need that population. We do not need to alienate moderate Muslims. We need them. They are our friends. So, once again, I appreciate the discussion. I think it's a very valuable discussion to have. Unfortunately, the topic is so polarized that people run for the broad brushes, broad strokes, because if you are going to really make movement or progress on this problem that the whole world is facing, we will have to be able to have a calm, rational, measured conversation about the challenges that we're facing. Thank you very much.
Now it's a question and answer. Here we go.
Before we do that, let me just recommend 3 books that I brought with me. If anybody is interested, this book is called The Fear of Islam. It's by Dr. Todd Green. It's a recent book. It's very well written, very well presented. This is a book by the Imam who was involved in the so-called Ground Zero Mosque, y'all remember? Imam Faisal. He's very articulate, very easy to understand. And this book is What's Right with Islam and What is Right with America. I wanted to give a pieces of his work, but maybe some other time. And this book is remarkable. This is probably the best book in the whole bunch. Who Speaks for Islam? This is written by Professor John Esposito at Georgetown, and Dalia Mujahid. She's a Muslim academic and teacher. This is a Gallup survey of the Islamic world. What are Muslims saying around the world? This is a jewel of a book. If you want to hear what this will take you out of the black and white and get you into the nuance, and you'll find out that some of your own ideas about what society ought to look like and what family ought to look like will be reflected in the aspirations and hopes of Muslims around the world. Okay, yes, sir. Sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you. And we get the message, and we understand that out of 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, that the vast majority are peace-loving, and it's only this small minority. You and the other guests are from South Asia, India, Bangladesh, not the Middle East. And they seem to have, the ones in the Middle East seem to have a different mindset. Most of the 9/11 terrorists were Saudi Arabians. my question to you, the long preamble, is it from Wahhabism, out of is it kind of a very ultra-Orthodox type of Islam?
Sure.
Or is it more a Shiite Sunni, conflict, or is it political? Iran, Syria versus Saudi Arabia, etc. So what I'm trying to say is that most of our quote terrorists or whatever, and the acts and the war seem to be in the Near East, what we call the Middle East, not Saudi. So is that the problem?
Well, first of all, most Americans don't know this. Out of a total 1.6 billion population, only 20% are in the Middle East. Right? So the majority of the population, which is the largest populated Muslim country in the world? Anybody know?
Indonesia.
The East Indies,
Indonesia.
Indonesia. Yeah.
Malaysia.
India has got a bigger population than Pakistan does. So the point is well taken. You're talking about the Middle East. It seems to dominate the discussion, but that is because, at least in the last 30 years now, 40 years, in the aftermath of World War II, the US has been up to absolutely no good in that region of the world, in my opinion. Absolutely no good. We can start from Iran in 1952, where the CIA, somebody said CIA a while ago. CIA fans over here? Okay. The CIA engineered a coup in 1952 in Iran and took out a democratically elected leader of the country, Mohammad Mossadegh.
But it is
But he
not.
was pro-communist. They considered him pro-communist.
He was pro-Iran.
He was pro-Iran. So one of the first blunders he committed, that brought the wrath of the West on him, not America, but the British were the kings, right? The British had the power. But he made the claim, Mohammad Mossadegh in 1952, as soon as he was elected, he made a proclamation that the oil that is underneath the soil belongs to us. That's what he said. He told the British oil company that was taking the oil out of Iran and giving Iranians pittance for their oil. He said, that game is over.
Typical.
Yeah? So the English were on, this is 52, this is after Second World War. Britain is destroyed, right, in Second World War. It's barely, standing on its feet. It's America, it's the US that is the power that is emerging. And the English came to the US and said, we need help. Can you believe what this guy is saying? And we need oil. And that was, if you look at the analysis, the West desperately needed oil, right? Industry was coming back up after the Second World War. So oil was a precious commodity that had to be had. I'm trying to get to answer your question because there's so much texture. It's so complicated. But I think I know what the answer is. The debate within Islam. I think that's what you were probably referring to. What is the debate within Islam? Well, there is a debate, and this has been going on for a very long time. Okay, this is not a new debate. Islam has been around for 1,400 years, right? The discussion about what is right or what is left has been going on for 1,400 years. There are elements within Muslim society today that express a totally different interpretation of the Quran than these jihadis do. It's totally different. I'll give you an example. The Quran, for example, I'm not an expert, so forgive me. It talks about the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth thing that Moses, and we're connected. We're connected to Christianity and we're connected to Judaism. Probably more so to Judaism than to Christianity. Because Moses had proclaimed that, the death penalty, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, that filters down into Islam too. And there's a discussion about the death penalty in Islam in Muslim countries. So some people will say, well, this has been decreed by God, that, for eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, and somebody takes a life, their life should be taken. But then there are others who say, well, if you look down that same text a little bit, just towards the end of that same text, it says, but God is merciful and forgiving. Same text. And will you not take that into consideration? The Quran says there is no compulsion in religion. Quran is just easy words to understand. There is no compulsion in religion, the Quran proclaims, tells Muslims. So what the hell are these people doing, trying to convert this guy or convert that person, or say this or say that? There's no compulsion in religion. This is what Muslims have been taught. So we have this whole view within Islam. It's been there for millennia, that Quran can be interpreted in a totally liberal manner. But we have no platform for that. Sufism is one example of that platform, which developed spontaneously on its own, organically within Islam. It's the devotional aspect of Islam. It's called Sufism. Look it up. Anybody reads Rumi? Rumi. A lot of people read Rumi. Hafiz, another one from Iran. Sufis. I'll recite to you one poem from Sufism to give you a taste of what some other people are thinking and saying and doing within Islam. And this is from the 9th century. She was a saint who wrote this poem. It's just 4 lines. She says, she's addressing God. She says, my Lord, if I love thee from fear of hell, burn me in hell. If I worship thee for sakes of paradise, bar me from its gates. My Lord, if I love thee from fear of hell, burn me in hell. If I love thee for sakes of paradise, bar me from its gates. But if I love thee for thy sake alone, show me then the beauty of thy face. But if I love thee for thy sake alone, show me then the beauty of thy face. There's no worrying about heaven and hell. Yes, sir. He had a question.
Yes.
She's got the mic right there.
Oh, sorry. Somebody needs to monitor.
No, could you say something about the 5 pillars of Islam?
He can do a better job. 5
And
pillars.
Ramadan.
Bismillah. Come on. He can do a better job.
Well, again, I'm not a scholar, but I will explain pretty easily. There are 5 pillars of Islam. The first one is faith. Believe in one God. There is no God but one God. In English we call God, in Arabic we call Allah. So there's no difference. The same thing but 2 different words. Second one is a prayer. We pray 5 times a day. Before sunrise, before the sun goes up, we pray once. Around noontime, around 12:30, 1 o'clock, we pray again. Around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, we pray again. And the sun goes down, we pray again. And then before bed. So there are 5 prayers every single day. The third one is it's called charity. It's called zakat. Zakat means charity. That we, besides paying IRS tax every year, we Muslims we pay extra 2.5% of our total income. If you have some money in your bank account, if you have some asset sitting in there for a year, you have to pay tax on top of you pay to the federal government. So we pay more tax than most of you. So that is the third pillar, the tax, the zakat, called charity. The fourth one is called fasting. In the holy month of Ramadan, we fast from dawn to dusk, and it's not just only depriving yourself from eating and drinking. It's more of like a self-cleansing, self-purification. That you feel for millions of people around the world, they don't know where the next meal will come from. You build a bond with those people. They're not as fortunate as like you. That there's no basic human rights, food, shelter, basic commodity. So this month actually teaches the Muslims to be more tolerant, more compassionate, more empathetic. It's just not depriving yourself from eating and drinking, and also you have to learn how to be a better human being. After fasting 30 days, if you do not feel you are better before the fasting started, your whole month was a time of it was a waste of time. So there are a lot of things in the month of Ramadan it teaches us. And the last one is pilgrimage, to go to Mecca. And there are conditions to that. If you are physically capable of doing that and financially able to do that, then it is mandatory. Otherwise, if you're not able to fulfill these two conditions, then you are not bound to do that. Alhamdulillah, by the mercy of God, I was able to do that with my mother in 2009. And it was a childhood dream to take my mom with me. So these are the 5 pillars of Islam. And basically, this is Islam. And if I just add one point to that question, the question you asked, about the majority of the terrorists and the violence comes from the Middle East, not from South Asia. Why there is a difference between Wahhabism, Shia, Sunni? Well, what we see in the world, in the West right now, Islam does not preach that. It's a misinterpretation of the Quran. Like when I came to US, I feel a lot of weird people around me. I was in New York City in summertime, and I heard people saying, it's cool, it's cool. I said, these people are retarded. Some are 80, 90 degrees outside, and they are saying it's cool, cool. In the class, we say, hey, how are you? They say, it's cool. So how is it cool? It's hot. It's 80 degrees outside. And as a newcomer to the US, you can understand that I'm not culturally, totally, adjusted in this country. And I said, hey, how are you? And they said, yeah, it's cool, man. What's up? I keep looking up. They're looking why they keep saying, what's up, what's up? So I was literally translating all the word I was hearing that time. And I thought, these people are weird. What is wrong with America? Then I asked one day one of my friends, that, hey, why do they keep saying, what's up, what is up? There's nothing up. It meant this cultural thing means, how are you? So I learned that. There are a lot of terrorists, they translate the Quran word by word. Yes, Quran talks about limited violence, but under certain context.
You handle the religious stuff, I'll handle the political stuff.
Right, so it talks about limited violence, but there is a context. Only if you're attacked, self-defense, and then you follow this. Only if you're attacked, not you have to go and attack somebody else. And there are a lot of explanation to that, but people do not read that. They just read the 2 lines, kill the infidels, done.
Okay, I can find it to you.
Yes.
Okay, in case somebody asks.
First off, I appreciate both of you being in our country and taking the efforts to express what you're expressing, because unity of all people is absolutely mandatory if we're to have a world of peace in the future. So I appreciate you two a lot. The thing I would like to address, and it may be better since this is such a positive presentation to do it at another time, but a lot of Americans, I think, fear the radicals. And we look back at yeah, I know. We look back at the history of the first and the second jihads and how many millions of people were killed in those events. What was the element that controlled that movement? And is that what is involved in the radicals of today, and how do we eliminate that?
Which jihad are you talking about?
Well, the first jihad, from what I have read, the Muslim movement came out of the Middle East and went into most of North Africa. And secondly, it went into Southern Europe, took over Spain and so forth. And that lasted for quite some time. And the reports that I have read, and I've listened to people who've researched it and have lectured on it, the reports are just horrible at the treatment of the people who were conquered during those times.
Have you heard of the Crusades?
No, I'm not denying that at all. But what I'm saying is, historically, these things apparently happened, and this is not at all the Muslim teachings and motives that you two are talking about, which I appreciate a lot. what was the controlling element for these two wars, basically?
Okay, I will try to answer that question best to my ability. First of all, I refute the comments or the information that you have. I don't think it's historically correct what you just said. These first and second jihad and these marauding forces that spread out to North Africa, this is a different reading of history. And I will encourage you, I would like to know your sources, and I will show you, if you show me yours, I'll show you mine. The truth, the way we see it, about the advent of Islam, and this is really, really important stuff. Imagine that part of the world. Americans are terrible at geography, I know that. Imagine the Middle East at that time, with Saudi Arabia in the middle. To the west, they have the Persian Empire. This is the year 610, which is probably a blind spot in y'all's memory, because Western history does not go far that back. I'm talking about 610. The Eastern Roman Empire in the west, and Iran, the Persian Empire in the east. And within 100 years, in 710, the Persian Empire is gone, and the Eastern Roman Empire, it's half its size, within 100 years of Islam's advent. So what exists in its place is the caliphate. It's based in Damascus. It stretches from the Pyrenees in France, southern France, all the way to the Himalayas. Okay? Within 100 years. What we have learned now, or what we know now, is that these armies that came out of Mecca, Medina, and Saudi Arabia, where the Prophet preached, were very comparatively small armies. These weren't huge armies. We're also learning now that in this period, in this region where Islam expanded so rapidly, archaeological finds indicate that the observance of Christianity was radically increased. They're finding more churches, ruins, that pertain to this particular era, more mosaics and more frescoes. Yeah? So this is sort of counterintuitive, right? Here's Islam expanding, and it's also in the area that Islam is expanding, Christian practices are on the rise. Yeah? So,
And Jewish too.
and Jewish too. So I was going to get to that the conquest of Europe by the Muslim armies was not just a Muslim conquest, but it was a Muslim and Jewish conquest of Spain. Because the Jewish and the Muslims were joined together in Mecca by the Prophet when he ostensibly wrote the first ever constitution that humankind has seen, in which he got the Jews and the Muslims to come together as a ummah. The word ummah comes from the word mother, ummah. So he brought the Jews and the Muslims in a coalition together under a constitution which gave joining parties the freedom to practice their religion. Right? So this is an important history of early Islam that we should know about if we are going to understand this complex situation. Let me finish my thought and we'll come back to you. So let me tell you a little bit about Muhammad and what we can learn from the life of Muhammad. This is an issue that I fervently hope you will just hear me out. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was born in a sort of a low-ranking tribe. His father had died by the time he was born, and his mother died when he was very young. He was taken care of by his grandfather first, and then by his uncle. Muhammad had this habit of going into a retreat around Mecca in a cave up in the hills. And one day he had this revelation. The angel Gabriel came to him and spoke to him, and he was terrified by that experience. And he came running back to his wife, who calmed him down and heard his whole story. That is the beginning of Islam. So the folks that he attracted, the people that came to support him and believed in him and supported him, were people on the margins. Because Muhammad knew about what it meant to be living on the margins of society. He came from, like I said, a low-ranking tribe. He was a nobody. And Meccan society at that time was extremely tribal. And that's the best thing I can tell you about that society right now, because it was a horrible society. It was an absolutely terrifying way to live together. There was infighting, the clans were at each other's throats all the time. There was murder, mayhem. They were burying their infant daughters. This is the level of depravity that this society that Muhammad came into, how depraved this society was. Can you get the picture? In this atmosphere, in this environment, Muhammad is inclined towards those who are on the margins. Orphans, women, people who do not belong to tribes, people who are in low-ranking tribes, people who don't have patrons. In that society, if you didn't have a tribe or this or that or that or that, if you didn't have a patron, your life was impossible. Really difficult time. People have called that era the Walking Dead. Imagine, they're human beings like us, but historical circumstances had made them go down to a level that is unthinkable right now. So Muhammad comes into this environment, and his connection is with those who are on the margins. That's his immediate connection, and that's how he builds up. Let me tell you one more thing interesting about that. He was under so much threat by the Meccan authorities because he's about to flip the paradigm, right? You know, he starts talking about the rights of the poor. Slaves. And the authorities that are in charge are threatened by this, right? You all know this story, right? It's the same story. Those who want to maintain the status quo, maintain their privilege, maintain their wealth, they say this guy is going to upset everything. So he was persecuted. His followers, who were slaves and orphans and outcasts, they were tortured. Right? So and this is what I was going to share with you. This is really important. He wants to save his people, and he makes a suggestion to them, gathers them up and says, this is getting very, very dangerous. What you ought to do is go to Ethiopia. Now, I know Americans don't have any idea about history, right?
Ethiopia's where it all started.
So Ethiopia is across the Red Sea from Mecca.
South of Egypt.
Yeah, it's just across the Red Sea. So what is the significance of this? He says to his people who are under threat, this small group of marginalized people, he tells them, go to Ethiopia. And there's a Christian king there, and you will be safe. There's no rancor, there's no ill will with Christianity at that early stage. In fact, it's the opposite. He would send his closest followers, closest to him, that love him the most, that are risking their life for him, to Ethiopia. But anyway, and that is the longest lasting continuous Muslim community in the world. That is in Ethiopia today. In Ethiopia today. By the way, he goes to Medina. He carries to Medina. That's where he takes refuge. He lives there. I want to tell you a story about what happened in Medina. He was in a caravan with a lot of his followers, and the caravan was attacked. So after the attack was over, he gathered up his followers and said, let's count our losses. Who lost who? This is a tribal place, right? Y'all understand tribalism. We are seeing that in our country, tribalism right now in certain areas. So he gathers up his people and asks them, who did you lose? So they all counted to a person, the person of their tribe that they had lost. Oh, Prophet, we lost this guy. Oh, Prophet, I lost this person. And then they asked him, and he said, yes, I lost one too. Who? Jaleba. Jaleba, he's not your tribe. Jaleba is not your tribe. How come you claim Jaleba? He says, because nobody else will. And that's what he pushed Muslims. He pushed Muslims to go beyond their tribal boundaries, to take the concept of human dignity beyond the tribe. He wanted to make the circle a little bit bigger. Now you wonder why Islam is so potent 1400 years later? That's one of the reasons. Because Muslims are taught that at a very early stage. That it's not just about you or your family or your neighborhood. It's about the ummah, it's everybody that's part of our family. And they define the world in ever-widening circles of solidarity and human dignity. And I find resonance of this same idea in the American project. You know, when you look at the founding of this country, it is also based upon a widening circle of human solidarity. Right? We're all equal before the law. We all have equal opportunity. That is the same message. And if that relevant message can be understood in its proper perspective, I think we will make progress in this country. Understanding some of these historical forces and historical incidents that we have been inherited.
What do you feel about Sharia law?
Oh, come on, man. Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit. So this is one of those gotcha type things, but we're not gonna do that tonight. But I will address that because you were kind enough to ask that question. So Sharia law is other religions have it too, right? The Jews have their own laws, right? Catholics have the same kind of laws, religious laws. Sharia, by definition, means the path to a drinking place where there's cool, quenching waters. Y'all hear that before? The path to a cool water place that quenches your thirst. That's what Sharia means. So the broader definition of Sharia is guidance how to conduct your life. It mostly deals quite a bit with issues of marriage and divorce and inheritance and burial. These are the same laws also exist in Judaism and also exist in Catholicism. So this is called Sharia. Now the problem is that 2%, about 2%, I think I've read from some scholars, 2% of Sharia laws are called hudud laws. Hudud, H-U-D-O-O-D, hudud laws. Those are laws about punishments. When people steal, when people lie, when people cheat, when people do adultery, when people, these kind of behaviors that societies, all societies have decried and denounced, right? So 2% of Sharia laws pertain to what are called hudud laws. But that seems to get the most focus because that's what we see in Saudi Arabia, right? And that's what is on TV, and that's what seems to be talked about. So if you are going to talk about Sharia laws, please put that in the proper context. Otherwise, any other discussion is sort of just sloganeering, Anyway.
I have two things. One is, are you familiar with a book, I believe it's called The Pact by a young man named Patel? The Pact?
Ibu Patel?
Yes,
Ibu
exactly,
Patel, yeah.
exactly. And if we were to put our children together and let them do activities that are positive from each of the religions, they find so much similarity in those religions. That was a wonderful little book, and we need to do that. But the second thing is, it seems a little bit unimportant with what you have gone through, but I have a 20-year-old grandson who has decided to study Islam, and he has been a lifeguard at Lifetime in Arlington, Mansfield for a long time, but recently he had been incensed because there are few people who are there who have been saying negative things about the Muslims who come there. And there's evidently quite a bit of large population of Muslims who work and live in that area. And instead of...
What's your question?
what do you suggest that he should have done? Now, what he did was to quit. And I was very upset with that because I said, but you can't change anything by just throwing up your hands and leaving. You should have done something different to fight that kind of behavior. What do you suggest he should have done?
It's a tough question, maybe raise it.
Well, before I answer your question, yeah, just quick short about the Sharia law. I read 5 times because of the Sharia law. There is no such book called Sharia law. It's just a religious code how a Muslim should live his life and how he should deal and daily activities. And there is a fear in the U.S. that Sharia law will replace American Constitution. The Sharia law will replace the U.S. Constitution, where we have only 2 congressmen in the U.S. Congress, and only 1% Muslim is gonna topple the U.S. Constitution. That shows they don't have enough knowledge about what can be done to our Constitution and how a 1% Muslim can replace Sharia with the existing Constitution. So there's a lot of ignorance out there, but as Hadi said, once you see everything in context, it will make more sense. It's not just only about punishment. It's a whole lifestyle. Okay, the point you mentioned, that is Ibu Patel. He runs a program called Interfaith Activities. He runs this program in 500 universities in the U.S. And he's a very talented guy. He has a PhD in Islamic Studies based in Chicago. And it's a very well-known program. And this is what he does. He brings kids from all different faiths and give them a safe platform to get to know each other so that they can build a better world. That is Ibu Patel. What he could do in a situation like that, what I did or what I do, I find ways to make people respectfully uncomfortable in a situation like that. When you don't understand me, instead of quitting, I rather try to find ways, how can we have a conversation? Unless we acknowledge the issue, we cannot solve it. So in order to come to a solution, we need to acknowledge it first. In order to acknowledge, we have to have a discussion, a friendly, respectful discussion. And I'll tell you just one quick story. I was in South Carolina to give a talk at the College of Charleston 2 years back. And I visited a master quarter in downtown Charleston, and my blood was boiling, seeing the slave quarter and the master. I wanted to make some people respectfully uncomfortable. So the lady who was standing there sharing information with the tourists, she kept talking about the slavery and all the glorious historical things. So when everybody left, I asked her that how it was okay for a group of human beings to treat another group of human beings as property, very respectfully. And she said, what was wrong with that? It was a way of life. The Greeks, the Romans, the Pharaoh, everybody had slaves. It was a way of life. I said, okay. Then she said, these slaves in this quarter were much better than those from the plantation because they could go out, they had a life. I said, okay. So I looked at her face and I gave her a smile and I said, would you be okay if you were one of them? And I left. I'm sure that was the first time she heard something in her entire life that she never expected. So in a situation like that, your grandson, instead of quitting, if I was there, I would have maybe take some initiative to find ways to engage with them in a dialogue and listen to them respectfully and let them also listen to me respectfully to find a common ground.
All right, yes ma'am.
Yes, people have freedoms in this country, can join any church they choose, have any religion. In the Muslim faith, what would happen if someone left the Muslim faith?
I don't know. I guess some people get upset, stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, on TV, various things are mentioned that people should die that leave the Muslim faith.
Yeah.
Have you not read that?
I don't think it's a universal view.
Where on TV?
And
Authorities.
who said it? Who said it?
Authorities, various authorities.
So there's 1.6 billion.
Condemned to death.
There's 1.6 billion adherents. I'm sure some of them are leaving or some of them are joining. All that stuff is going on. Does anybody have any questions? Any other questions? I was going to end with one comment, final comment.
One thing.
Okay.
Could Race tell us the correct title of his book, which was really, really a good book?
Well, The title of the book is The True American. The True American, written by a New York Times columnist named Anand Giridharadas. And a Hollywood movie is under development right now based on this story. The same title, The True American. Hoping this movie will be out by next year, hopefully.
And how do you spell the last name?
My name or his name?
Either one.
Okay. My last name is B as in boy, Huyya, N as in Nancy.
Okay. And who's directing the film?
Catherine Bigelow was supposed to be directing the film, but now she has Catherine Bigelow. She got another partner, Pablo Lara, and they both teamed up together.
She made The Hurt Locker.
Oh.
Yeah, famous, very famous. Yes, sir. Hank.
Hi. When's the last time you had been abroad, especially from Muslim countries?
My mom passed away in 2009. That's why I was in Pakistan. I just have one final comment, if everybody's done.
We're not done. We're all going to come up and talk.
Yeah, well, okay, all right.
You can sit down now.
And you will summarize.
Okay, I just wanted to say something really quick. This is not to say that there is not valid criticism of Islam. Like there is valid criticism of Christianity and other faiths, there is valid criticism of Islam. We're not going to get into that subject, we can come back and do that some other time, but I'll leave you with one area where you might think about, if you want to criticize, this is something worthwhile, instead of all this other stuff that you're naturally drawn to do. Stay away from the broad strokes. The area that you must think about, that I find totally unacceptable in my own country and others, is the whole notion of blasphemy laws. Blasphemy laws. The Pakistani government has passed laws against blasphemy. So right now, for many years now, we've had this Christian mother, and Christians are at the bottom of the social ladder in places like Pakistan. A lot of them are, not all of them, some of them are. And she has been in prison for the past 5 or 6 years now, under the blasphemy laws, under the execution date. She's been sentenced to death. Blasphemy laws are a scourge. They are a scam on Muslim society. There's no room, there's no place. And this is what I'm talking to you about when I say there are some other interpretations of Islam that we are not provided, because all we get provided is the rah, rah, rah. This is something that we should all be outraged about, that governments like the government of Pakistan passes these kind of laws to marginalize innocent people under the guise of, well, they said something bad about the Prophet Muhammad, or they drew a sketch, or burned the book, or, stuff like that. So that's one area of Islam that is worthy of your critique. And I would urge you to raise your voices and say, end these dastardly laws of blasphemy. Okay? That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Is there one more question?
Yeah.
Because of what you just said, it's kind of evidence that many religions, not just Islam, but Christianity, Judaism, their teachings, their holy books are twisted and interpreted in different ways, in horrible ways sometimes, and as justification for horrible stuff. So this is the argument of atheists and agnostics, that maybe religion in general is bad.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, I can answer that. So, in the last century, this idea was quite prominent, right? In the 20th century, we were talking about. Sit down, Mr. Tom. So, in the 20th century, this idea gained a lot of traction, right? If only we could get rid of religion. Now that we're getting smarter and richer and universities and educated, we will not have. You all remember this argument? It was quite strong in the 20th century. So what did the 20th century give us? It gave us fascism, it gave us Nazism. What else did it give us? This was the bloodiest history in the history of mankind. You know, we don't need God to kill each other. We don't. So I think that's a false argument.
Okay.
Okay, now it's your turn to talk. You got 5 minutes to respond to the speaker said for or against. Who wants to be first?
For those of you that are new to this group, the paper says any people.
We can't hear you.
For those of you that might be new to this group, the rules are any fool can give their opinion, so I feel comfortable in coming up here. I was here the evening that the speaker from SMU left, and I felt myself that there was we often have extreme viewpoints here. Anyone is free to give their viewpoint. We often have that, but I felt that there was an aggressiveness about it that was very uncomfortable. And when the speaker said, well, I am a Muslim, when these negative things were being said, no one, and then shortly after the speaker decided to leave, and no one said, oh, I'm sorry, or you know, they're nice people too. It was just the lack of sensitivity which said to me that some people view them as not human. It felt that way to me. And I was very disturbed about that, very concerned. So I was glad that we got a face tonight of 2 humans that were very compassionate, very solid, rational people. Let's see, I had one other point. I can't think of it right now, so that's all. Thank you. I know what it was. Sometimes people come to this group and will say this, that, and the other. And one time I asked somebody, where did you hear that? I never heard that before. And they said, oh, look it up. Oh, it's on the internet. It's all over the internet. I searched and searched and searched, not there. So sometimes you hear people giving out facts that are not really true. And if you want to have an exchange, an honest exchange of ideas, you have to know what your facts are.
I was able to listen to our speaker tonight with pleasure, and I told myself, don't say a blasted word tonight. But after you got up and spoke, I had to. Right. I triggered the response in that meeting she referred to. And I came up here and I said, I have multiple, so positive, I didn't understand it. I have multiple Muslim and people from Muslimic countries who are my friends. I have friends from Tehran and Damascus. I have a Christian Jew friend from Jerusalem, of all things. You know, and there's a real mixture of people over there and in the different branches of the Muslim faith, which our speaker did not have time tonight to go through and explain to us completely and explicitly, that are very different. But I said nothing negative. All of a sudden, this gentleman stood up and started ranting. And the lady who was sitting at the table with him, who was either the speaker's companion or his wife, we don't know which, motioned him to leave. Well, I refused to say another word because I thought, Gee whiz, Jim, if you stand up and say another word, you might have plates thrown at you, you know? You thought you were being very positive, and that person thought you were being very negative.
I wasn't referring to you.
And so, we have to, like our speaker has said, we have to be open to one another, to listen to one another, and hear one another's viewpoints. And I have been able to do that. I've been very fortunate that I've had friends from that part of the world who told me not secondhand, but firsthand, what it's like to live in some of the roughest places on this planet. And there are some very, very, very fine people there. And there's some very wicked, ugly people that you would not want to be living next to you in the house. And what's different from that in other countries? Well, that's just there. And I don't have any hatred or negative feelings about people from that part of the world, or about Muslims in Pakistan or in Indonesia. I just flat don't have them. And I'm so sorry if anything that is said in this meeting is that way. Now, the next week, of all things, we had the speaker come who teaches at a school, used to be a financial advisor. He's a very bright man. He's spoken to us several times. But he talked about the subject in some depth. And because it would be so controversial if it got out to his school or out into the public view, we had no camera that night. It's a touchy subject. And you can find examples of just about any kind of behavior in any kind of religion in the world. I understand that. Our speaker did a nice job of painting a very nice positive picture of Muslim as he has experienced it and seen it. That is largely true. He acknowledges that there are some people who don't fit that mold. That is also true. And I appreciate the candor and the honesty that our speaker brought to us tonight. We live in the world where we have opened our borders to people from all over the world, and they've moved here, and we have to get some grip of understanding on who they are and what they stand for, so we can accept them as Americans and not as some weird strangers from another planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hadi. That was interesting. Well, almost every time I come up here, I have something critical to say.
No kidding, Hank.
Yeah. Well, why is that? Everybody, tonight's speaker included, I feel is a sincere person, and that's great. The theme that runs through this repetitive criticism is, I think, that we're being played sometimes. The talk you gave tonight, Hadi, would have been more appropriate 15 years ago. Today, the concern is what's going on in Europe and Canada, and the governments as well. They're making laws in places, not in the United States, but in Canada and in European countries, where you cannot question Islam, criticize Islam. And this is the current event. Hey, let me talk to him now. I got to talk to Hadi now.
What laws are exactly are they?
Okay, well, go on the internet and look. God bless the internet. There's so many people losing their jobs and getting fired and getting put in jail if they. Tommy Robinson, for instance. Anybody know about Tommy Robinson? This is another one of my always repetitive themes. The media is completely sold out now. Tommy Robinson is a British person that got put in jail because he filmed the rapists when they were going to trial. He was standing outside, and it was a kangaroo Kafkaesque thing. He was in prison within 15 hours. Usually it takes.
Is there a law against wearing what there? Is there a law?
Well, they made a law. They made a new. There's something called. This is going to be a side thing, but it's called the D notice. D notice goes back to World War II, where you're not allowed to report on military things. Anyway, that's going to sidetrack me a little bit. The timing of this talk is interesting. Just recently we had a Mexican guy come up here, and he was just saying, man, Mexicans are great, and you better not mess with us because we do the barter system. Anything that you do that we don't like, you need to deal with us because there's lots of us. It was pretty much just a shakedown. It seemed really corrupt and stupid. I call that identitarian politics. And I know we got a lot of visitors here from the left, and I'm here to address you. I don't know how to do it without being too confrontational, but identitarian politics is a real slippery slope.
Identitarian?
Politics. Identitarian means that you're given an identity by some other group, like the leftists, like you guys, you Democrats. Okay, here it is. Top of the heap. Lesbians. Then you got transgender. Then you got the blacks. And it goes down, down, down to the very bottom, which is me. And they call me a white man. I don't know. White, by the way, the white race was invented 100 years ago. There used to be 5 different races. The Irish were considered monkeys in those days. But anyway, when you go into the hospital anywhere, you got to sign what your race is. That race is one. They got race, gender, all kinds of things. Muslim is one of them. It's way up at the top. It's a pyramid. Anyway, the higher your victim status is, that's your identity. So in other words, you're shaking your head. The young people today, this is different. See, the left is going to a radical, hard left turn here. They're told like, oh, abortion. I have nothing to say because I'm a white man. My identity is my identity. Hey, be quiet for a minute. Let me explain it. My identity is determined by groups, and it's a new phenomenon, and so your group is given to you. Like if you're a transgender or if you're a black, you're supposed to go along this party line, or a Mexican, and so that's what identitarian politics is. And that's what we got going on here today a little bit. Hadi's a celebrity simply for being a Muslim because you guys are buying into this guilt thing, and I'm saying there's bigger agendas afoot, and there's things happening in Europe and Canada that are crazy, and that's what people are scared of today. I mean, we can argue about things in history and so forth, but recent history, who knows about Rotherham? Who knows about Tommy Robinson? You guys don't even know about Rotherham? Listing off white people that did crimes, I don't think that does too good. But anyway, we're all being manipulated. So just be careful you don't get on a bandwagon and start getting stars in your eyes one way or the other. The other side of that is hate. It's much easier to hate people than to like people.
Well, Hadi, both of you, I thought, gave very excellent presentations tonight. And this idea of the division that Hank has addressed is the biggest issue that we have, in my opinion. We are being separated into all these little competitive groups, and left, right, etc., etc. And we're being manipulated in that way, largely with emotional issues. And that's why I've said here numerous times, every degree of emotion necessarily alters your perception of reality. You must have emotions if you're going to be a normal human. But when it comes to issues that involve the rights and the well-being of other people, we need to push those issues aside, not ignore them, but then focus on the issues that are before us with clear logic and reason, regardless of our feelings. And I think that's very important. I think that we have been manipulated so much by what people are referring to as the dark government. Whoever is controlling things behind the scenes. And I know this sounds like conspiracy theory. Well, yes, it is. Because conspiracies drive everything in this world. You wouldn't have wars without secret adventures that are done by these people. One of the greatest evil operations in this world, in my opinion, has been what the CIA has been doing for years. They created Al-Qaeda. They, from what I have read, created ISIS. When it came to destroying Libya, which had a gold-backed dinar that was the threat of the international banking system, they were trying to get North Africa involved in that. The CIA gave millions of dollars to 250,000 radical Al-Qaeda, gave them weapons to invade Libya and destroy that country. And that was one of the most advanced governments in the world at the time. And what we have been told in all of the Western media is BS. And you need to look up, go to what is it, the Libyan War, thetruth.com by the Moriartys. They were there on the scene at the time. They lectured here at this meeting once. Other things like Ukraine. Here, we're blaming Russia on Ukraine. Ukraine had a duly elected president, what was his name? Yanukovych. And he was negotiating with the EU when the financial crisis came, the banking crisis around the world. And Russia started offering a better deal, so he turned to them, and then we sent in Blackwater and all kinds of whatever it took to form a revolution in that country. We blamed the Russians for giving the radicals missiles that shot down that airliner. All Russia had to do was produce pictures of the crash of the airliner that showed the cockpit had been riddled with 20mm cannon shot coming from Ukrainian jet fighters from the government backed by the Western powers. And that was the end of any statements about the Russians being behind that. But so many things that we have been taught in this world are not true, and we need to dig deeper into it. Now, I think the divisions in the Middle East are largely historically from the presence of Great Britain and the United States in the Middle East. And yes, a lot of it was about oil. But the greatest profit motive in the world is manufacturing all the goods it takes to have a war. And that is one of the biggest incentives for going to war. It is the incentive for going to war. And we need to look at these issues because a lot of what we have been taught is just not true. Look into the architects and engineers for 9/11. Islamic terrorists didn't do 9/11. That was an inside job. And anybody who still denies that refuses to investigate it. Look up the architects and engineers for 9/11. Look up what they have analyzed and shown. There are tons of DVDs on this analyzing all of the difference and so forth of what's been said about how those buildings came down. Fire has never brought down a steel framed building. Jet fuel can't burn hot enough to weaken the steel. 1750 degrees max, and it takes
2,000, over 2,000.
well over 2,000 degrees to begin to soften steel. Bunch of lies.
Can you go,
rid of everybody.
I know, that always happens.
They don't want to hear
They don't want to listen.
That's right.
That's what they think it's a rally. It's just, it says that, everybody thinks it's a rally. They don't want to hear it.
They don't want to hear it.
Well, if they like it, it's good.
And I couldn't let Hank get away.
Very good. You got to summarize. After all the comments, you have to summarize. I didn't sign up for that. Oh, come on, we want you to do it.
That's part of it.
Oh, what about me, Josh? Anything naughty?
No, I'm just kidding. I would like to say I enjoyed the presentation, and it should have helped us some way to see things a little bit more broader. And one of the things that interested me when he talked about the attitude of Muhammad and what he and the group of people he was working with is almost parallel to what we studied about Christ. He was always looking to the poor people and trying to make things better for them. And one of the things that I maybe don't share the same perception of the Muslim Islam community is because they use the Old Testament. The traditions use the Old Testament. They don't use the New Testament. But they probably not too far from us. And any religious group, like someone else already illustrated tonight, is that we all have our radical groups. We all have radical groups. You know, in Dallas we have Dr. Jeffries. He said God told him to tell the president to bomb North Korea. Yeah.
Wow, that's insane.
Reverend Jack.
Yeah, so we have in Christian world, we all read the same Bible. We have all these denominations, and it's because of different interpretations. So if we do it here, it's possible they may do it in Islam. They may not always agree on what the Quran says. And I think we need to look at that before we come to judgment about other religious groups, because, you know, as an African American, I can consider the white men's terrorists because what they did to us, and what we have done to the American Indian, and what we have done to other people. We practice a great deal, like someone said, we deal with peripheral issues, emotional issues, and that is dangerous. Emotion is good for love, but not for nothing else. So we need to think, if we would sit down and openly listen to each other, we would find that we aren't that far apart. We would find more areas where we agree than we disagree. And that's what I kind of think we ought to do. Because I do know that you know, we are, and someone was talking about when President Trump talks about patriotism, it bothers me. He got all kinds of deferments not to go to war. But if a football player wants a knee to protest police brutality, that's unpatriotic, and he ought to be fired. So when you have the person at the helm making those kind of iterations, it affects other people and what they think and what their behavior becomes. And I think it creates a kind of behavior that most of us will not find good. We find some bad about it. But we in fact, we don't understand our own history. And we look at the history of what is, Iran and Iraq, they go way, way back. And we have a propensity to think people ought to adopt our culture. And people who have old cultures, they aren't about to do it. And what we did in Iran, that was mentioned earlier, by cause of the revolution, so we get to awe. And when we said, remember the white destruction in Iraq, we sold them everything they had. They fought Iran 2 years for us. So we need to understand what's going on, just not believe something that comes on the media. So we have to look at everything discerningly. So I would recommend it, including myself, look at everything discerningly before we make a decision. Thank you.
I think I'm the last one standing. I want to thank our speaker for doing a great job here tonight. You got us all thinking. That's a part of why he was here, to get us thinking in the right direction, possibly, that we were more inclusive and we get along better. I forgot what I had some things in mind. Anyway, there's a this country was founded on away from religious persecution, to get away from religious persecution, which may be why Islam and the people of Islam worship this country in that respect, because we don't have a state religion. We don't believe in a state religion. We believe in religious freedom. So we don't think that Islam or anything else will ever take over. And Sharia law is like canon law. It's a law within the religion. It has nothing to do with the state law, and it never should, and never will. And that's one of the fears that people have. They think Sharia law is going to take over this country. They're full of it, because it's not going to happen. Because our Constitution, everything we believe in, is that we have a separation of church and state in this country. We have freedom of religion, freedom for people to believe what they want. Now, as far as Islam itself, and I'm reminded the Christian religions had a Bible, and they went to a Reformation, and they came in with a New Testament. And from the Old Testament to the New Testament, they rooted out all the evil stuff that they saw, killing other people, killing, sacrifice, so on, and they got away from that to try to get a more sensible religion. And I think that Islam has its own writings. You know, whatever can be misunderstood in writing will be misunderstood. That's a known fact. And the jihadists and all the rest, they pick out what they want, and they fight for that, and they cause all kinds of problems. So I think that if there was a solution, the part of the solution would be for Islam to reflect on itself and to upgrade its Sharia law in that sense to a more reasonable approach. Then get rid of the phrases that are in there that ask to kill other people, etc. So anyway, I'll leave that alone and I'll give that back to our speaker. I think he did a great job here tonight.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So I didn't know about this segment.
Your last word.
Yeah, but I'll be glad to. I've lived here for 45 years. I came here in 1973. I love this country. I love living here. I have deep roots in this community, and it's just been a blessing to be a part of this community and this society. And we have gone through a lot of stuff together. My early education was in Catholic schools. This might be counterintuitive to you guys. Grew up in Pakistan, a predominantly Muslim country. I remember my poor mother dragging me from Catholic school to Catholic school to Catholic school to get me admitted, because that was the prize. If you could send your child in Pakistan in the 1950s and 60s to a Catholic school, you were guaranteeing your child's not only survival, but a means to make a good, decent livelihood, because you will get exposed to Western thought, Western language, Western ideals, Western ideas. It's counterintuitive, right? Because we hear all the time on media how Muslims are clamoring to teach their children about fundamentalism or jihadism, or it's to the contrary. It's the opposite of that. I have 5 sisters. They all went through a Christian convent, taught by sisters, through the primary and secondary education till high school. There are so many misconceptions and so many misunderstandings between the East and the West, and they have been around for so long that if you feel overwhelmed, you're not alone. It's a formidable challenge. But sloganeering and broad brushes is not going to get us there. It's going to take the hard work. Now, the new generation that we're seeing, and I speak to the kids a lot, do a lot of work with them. We just sent 22 kids from Dallas area to Washington, D.C. They spent 4 days up in DC learning how to lobby. These were 15-year-old through 25-year-old kids, 22 of them. Young, bright-eyed, wanting to make our society, our country a better place, learning how to participate in this great project we call the American democracy, right? So you look to our youth, and I'm so excited to tell you that we have such a wonderful group of young people who are coming up. At least the ones that I get in touch with. They fill my heart with hope. And I'm looking forward to working with these kids. The Dallas Peace and Justice Center helped provide the platform where they could gather their money and do the fundraising so they could all go up there. And I have some of my colleagues back there who helped with that project too. Joyce Hall and Carolyn back there. Finally, the only thing I wanted to leave you all with is, it seems to me like the basis, the fundamentals, the core, the essence of what all our faiths are, whether you're a Buddhist or you practice the old Chinese religion of Confucius, or whether you're a Taoist, whether you're a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew, whatever, the fundamental thread that ties all of these religions together throughout history, it doesn't matter which era, which religion, which country, which geography, the core principle is what we need to go back to, and that's simply articulated in the words of Jesus Christ. Treat others like you want to be treated. But every other religion has said the same thing. Confucius said the same thing. Muhammad said the same thing. Moses said the same thing. The founders of Hinduism said the same thing. It's the same principle at work everywhere. Treat others like you want to be treated. That's enough. Thank you.
Well, that's it for tonight. They kick us out of here at 10:30, just so you know. Our speaker is still here if you want to talk to him, but our formal meeting is over. Thank you. See you next week.
All right.
Thank you.